The global trading system, which has helped power Canada's prosperity for decades, is undergoing its biggest transformation since the fall of the Berlin Wall. At home, our long-standing weak productivity is making life less affordable for Canadian families. So Canada's new government has an immense responsibility to address these challenges head-on, with focus, new strategies, and determined execution. And that new approach animates the mandate letter that I shared with all members of our ministry at the end of our meeting. It reflects a unified mission.
That was Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday after announcing he has given his entire cabinet one mandate letter. Now, it's one letter with 7 priorities for his government. Here they are in a nutshell. He wants his team to focus on establishing a new economic and security relationship with the United States while also strengthening collaboration with reliable trading partners and allies around the world. He's looking to remove interprovincial trade barriers and bring down costs for Canadians. Carney says his government will also be focused on making housing more affordable, protecting Canadian sovereignty, and returning to sustainable levels of immigration, while also spending less on government operations. So it's a lot in there for just one letter, but what does this signal about Carney's priorities and how he intends to govern? Let's bring back the front bench. Christy Clark, Monty Sahlberg, and Nathan Cullen. Monty, I'll start with you on this one. So he's made it just one for all. Do you think that this covers everything, or are there some cracks there when you consider there's some ministries that may look at this and go, I don't really see how this applies to me?
No, I think just about everybody's involved. It's just a case of the economic ministers like LeBlanc and Champagne, Joly, Hodgson, et cetera, leading the charge, and other ministers playing a supporting role. David McGuinty will play more of a supporting role probably on national security, but even Minister Diab, as immigration minister, will be involved because she'll be expected to ensure that new immigrants to Canada are fully screened and that there's no concerns about security, for instance. So I think it's a good approach, quite frankly. It reminds me of what we did in 2006, where we had 5 priorities, and those ministers led on their issues, and the rest of us, to some degree, fell in behind and supported them and presented the public with something that we could demonstrate we had achieved and show that we had moved the ball forward for Canadians.
Nathan, at the same time in 2015, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, when he was issuing mandate letters, made them public for the first time in a long time, but also had really customized them to every one of the ministers, and then actually had a tracker where you could go online and see whether or not they were meeting their goals. When you compare that approach to this one, which one do you think is better?
I generally like the accountability. I like the, at least, what was an attempt at accountability for the ministers. We've all served in that type of portfolio where a clear direction from the center in terms of what you need to get done and what you're going to be held accountable for is helpful. This is a broad list. It's 7 very broad and important things. So you can't quibble with what's on the list, although there will be some groups and some Canadians that are not going to see themselves on the list and say, well, wait, what are we doing about equality? I don't see a great deal of work here about reconciliation, for example. I was looking through it earlier, trying to find the words climate change in it. There's going to be some folks that are going to be a bit worried, but you can also understand the approach given the threats coming particularly from the U.S., and what those economic impacts are going to be, why so much of this is seen through the lens of dealing with Donald Trump, frankly, and the pressures that have been building on Canadians for a long time who have been trying and can't afford to buy a house, and the list is long, and that was the argument of the last election, both of those things, cost of living and Donald Trump. And I think these 7 priorities are meant to encapsulate that and give some focus. We'll see. I like novelty. I like new approaches. Nothing wrong with that. We'll see if it makes any difference.
Christy, one thing that I thought was interesting in this letter was one passage where he says, over the coming weeks, I will look to each of you to identify the key goals and measures of success on which to evaluate the results that you will achieve for Canadians as a member of the ministry. Feels like a bit of empowerment that he's trying to give to his ministers and saying, look, I'm not going to draw you a roadmap, but you got to make sure that you come back to me with a path forward.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways of doing this. I actually think that the whole mandate letter idea as it stands now started in 2001 with Gordon Campbell's government in BC. I could be wrong. There could be another originator, but it's something we always did. And my view of it is, first and foremost, the mandate letter's purpose is not just to get the minister going. More importantly, it's to make sure that all of those layers in the civil service have goals to work to, that they know what they're doing, that there's some beginnings of a plan. So, you know, the lack of specificity, I think, is something that's going to come next. So broad strokes of what he wants to do, very much focused on jobs, workers, economic growth, growing tax revenues through more employment, and you know, and finding investment for the things to diversify our markets. All of that's in there at broad strokes. Then he's saying to the ministers, okay, we want you and your deputies to come up with a specific plan. So say you're in housing, for example, Gregor Robertson is going to have to sit down with his deputy and talk about, okay, how many houses are we planning to, what are our goals for the first year, second year, third year, fourth year? And really get down to, at some granular level. My hope is that those will also become public, because that's the real accountability. I mean, you want to make sure the civil service knows what they're supposed to be doing, but you want to make sure the public has some measures that they can hold you to. And you know, my hope is, and I think this is what they're going to do, is in a couple of months we will see that specificity, because the ministers will have had the time to work through that.
Feels
Monty,
like a
how
more
important is
approach.
that?
Sorry, Mike. It seems like this would be a much more corporate governance structure from a CEO handing this down, and as Christy said, now come back to me with deliverables and goals that I'm going to measure you against. I also got a little sense of, if you don't perform, ... I just, in the way he's spoken about putting this cabinet together, which I think might be a little different than in cabinets past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Monty, what do you think about that, especially in the report back to me, and to Christy's point about making sure that you report back to Canadians as well? Because I think the expectations from people who voted for the Liberals is pretty high.
Well, this is the role of the opposition, of course, to make sure that people do meet the objectives that the government has put before them. And, you know, certainly the Conservatives, the NDP, Bloc, et cetera, will all be doing that. But, you know, Christie's completely correct when she says the public service needs their marching orders. They need something to work off of. And so they'll be busy looking at these 7 priorities, and identifying the areas in their departments where they can do some things that will help the government meet these objectives. That'll become part of the conversation with the minister. And ministers, I think, ultimately will present these back to the government, say, here's how we're going to contribute. So, you know, this will all fall into place for them. They'll figure that out. The question is whether or not they can achieve these objectives, because they are lofty. I mean, these are big objectives. After 10 years of stagnant growth, they've got to get the economy going again at a time when we're facing tariffs, low oil prices, and a lot of uncertainty in the world. And so the plans are one thing, it's achieving them that's the really hard thing.
Yeah,
and of course, Tim Hodgson's going to be out your way soon, tomorrow, and he's going to be talking to the oil patch, and we will see how people are starting to respond to his call for investment, and whether or not Canadians in Alberta, which is a powerhouse economic producer for Canada, are they going to accept this? Are they going to believe it? Is it enough? And I think tomorrow is going to be a really crucial test for the government.
It's a sold-out event,
yeah.
I can tell you. And everybody will be there. They're dying to know whether or not there's going to be an olive branch. But full marks to Minister Hodgson, the Prime Minister, and to Champagne for going out there and meeting with the Alberta government and really demonstrating a bit of goodwill that was so completely lacking under Prime Minister Trudeau. And I can tell you, people are just glad for the change. They're glad he is gone.
Okay. Unfortunately, we got to leave it there. I want to thank Christy Clark, Monty Solberg, and Nathan Cullen for being part of the front bench today.